Story 1. My coworker married a very controlling man. All the decisions about the wedding were his, including the venue and food, which was at a restaurant she had always disliked, her dress, which was absolutely not her style, her bridesmaids, who were none of her close friends but just his two sisters, the guest list, where she was allowed 12 people including family and he had about 120, the music, decorations, and everything else. She had one request: no cake smashing. Guess what he did? Story 2. Maybe 6 hours after the wedding, her ex called and said he was out of jail and needed a ride home. She never came back. They got it annulled shortly thereafter. Story 3. A friend of my uncle left his wife to be with a woman he met while traveling in Vietnam, traveling with his wife, mind you. They got married in Vietnam. On the wedding night, the woman's daughter told everyone she was pregnant with his child. The marriage was over. He left the country and is now just a lonely man sending money to support a child he will likely never meet. Story 4. I managed a restaurant that we rented out as an event space. A man got married at 5 and was caught in the bridal suite around 9 with his ex, who was not invited to the wedding. They married on a Sunday, and the wife had the marriage annulled on Monday. Her father told me about it later that week and said they tried to talk her out of the marriage for months before the wedding. Story 5. I had a friend who got married in college. After the ceremony, his new wife told him he was not allowed to see his mother, father, or siblings again. He filed for an annulment the next morning. Story 6. My friend's marriage lasted about 24 hours. Soon after, he heard that his wife was having an affair with their best man after her bachelorette party. I am still in shock. Story 7. Same as most here. My high school sweetheart married a man who owned a miniature golf course in a small town. I would like to believe he made her think he owned a golf course the whole time, but they did not last past the honeymoon before they annulled it. I want the toaster I gave them back. Story 8. Maybe like 10 to 12 hours. A friend realized on the night of her wedding that the groom was gay. She left immediately. Story 9. 31 days. A friend of mine married his girlfriend in a big expensive wedding. While they were on their honeymoon, he got drunk and slept with some waitresses at the hotel where they were staying. His wife found out and, deservedly so, filed for divorce as soon as they returned home. I called him a fool at least twice a day for the next year. Story 10. As Muslims, we have a nikah, which officially marks the start of the marriage. In this case, the nikah was done privately, and then the bride and groom came out and sat on the stage. While they were seated, the groom's mother brought food to them but accidentally spilled curry on the bride's dress. In that moment, the bride swore, and the groom immediately stood up and said he was divorcing her for disrespecting his mother. After that, everyone ate and both families went home. The whole wedding lasted about an hour. Story 11. Friend's sister's wedding. Married on Friday evening, the groom was unpleasant, but the families were connected. Sunday morning, she called from her locked hotel room asking for someone to rescue her. Story 12. They said, "I do." Got to the reception, he panicked as soon as he walked in and said he couldn't do it. Ripped up the paper and bolted. She was in shock. Their friend was the officiant and hadn't mailed it yet. I feel like that should have been a sign. He tried to come back a week later and beg her to take him back. She dumped a bucket of water on his head and told him to kick rocks. It was actually pretty funny for a second. He shook himself off like a dog does when they get wet. Story 13. I have seen the writing on the wall on the day of the wedding. He wanted a child-free life and she thought she could change his mind. She did not. Story 14. A week after the wedding, she cheated, and they were still paying for the luxury wedding a year after the separation. We never got to see any pictures from the wedding. Story 15. 6 hours. He made a joke about her mother during the toast and she went nuclear. Vows still drying in the chapel. Story 16. It took less than 6 months of suddenly changed behavior for me to realize it was a huge mistake. It took me another 2.5 years to finally get over the embarrassment and file for divorce. When I tried to talk to him, he actually said, "I already courted you. We're married now, so I don't need to court you anymore." He didn't want to see me after work, expected me to make dinner every night but refused to sit down to eat with me. didn't want to take me out for my birthday, and wouldn't even accompany me to visit my dying grandfather. He just wanted to play video games and hang out with his friends. He met a really nice woman after we divorced and pulled the same behavior on her. They had a child together, so she stuck it out a bit longer trying to save the marriage before she finally realized she was better off leaving him. Story 17. As a young lawyer on a Monday morning, I arrived at the office. The wedding was on Saturday. At the reception, with far too much drinking, the bride's family and the groom's family got into a bottle-throwing, chair-swinging brawl that required police from 3 towns to quell. The bride ran outside, took the rings, and threw them on the roof of the venue. The groom was seeking a divorce, so I opted to plead an annulment for him. That was it. He was a good client. I handled 2 more divorces for him in the next 6 years. Story 18. Went to a wedding on Saturday. He moved out on Friday. A bit of background, as I know 6 days sounds unbelievable. She was blissfully happy. He was not. He convinced himself that the wedding would help, but it did not. Story 19. 24 hours, twice. The first was a bride who did not take her psychiatric medication on the day of the ceremony and stabbed her husband with the cake knife. The second was a bride who cheated on the groom with his best man at the wedding venue and was caught on the security cameras. Story 20. 2 months. My friend was adamantly child-free and thought her now ex-husband was too until he tried baby-trapping her by microwaving her birth control pills. She got an abortion and had the marriage annulled. She is now remarried to a great man who also does not want children. Her ex served time for sexual battery against another woman. Story 21. At the reception, the maid of honor said she slept with the groom. The bride punched him in the face and immediately annulled the marriage. The marriage lasted only 3 hours. Later, it turned out the maid of honor did not sleep with him. The maid of honor was jealous of the bride. The bride tried to get back with the groom. The groom coldly punched her, breaking her nose, and told her to go to hell. Story 22. A good friend and coworker I knew for years. They just finished their honeymoon, moved into their house, and she cheated on him with a mutual friend who was also married. This all happened within a 3-month span. I haven't spoken to her since. The really sad part was that the husband depended on her to get to work because he had severe epilepsy, and his whole life turned upside down. Story 23. About a month. They had agreed to be child-free. She had nearly died from a pregnancy years ago. After marriage, she became determined to try for a baby. He said no because he was firmly child-free and did not want to put her life at risk. She divorced him and quickly found a man willing to put her life at risk to try for a baby. As far as I know, she is still alive, so that is something. Story 24. There was a recent news story about the shortest marriage ever. A girl walked out of the ceremony at the end, tripped and fell. Her husband called her stupid and laughed. She went back in and asked the priest to annul or divorce the marriage. Story 25. I knew a girl in high school who was with her boyfriend for 10 years. They were engaged after 5 years. They planned and canceled a wedding 3 different times and lost tens of thousands of dollars. Finally, they got married. No less than 6 months later, they were divorced. Last I heard, they are still together. It is completely insane. Story 26. My cousins, I think it was less than 6 months. I met her husband at the reception and I could just tell. I looked at my mom immediately after talking to him for the first time and said, I give it a year. Mom told me to quit being negative and that as long as she's happy. I got the news about 6 months later that they were separated and she was in rehabilitation. She is better now. Story 27. In my small hometown, there is a man who went on a honeymoon and intentionally missed the flight back so he could stay with his wife's best friend and cheat on her. He is now the mayor of the town. What an example. I am glad I left that place. Story 28. Bride caught the groom having sex with her best friend in the toilet during their wedding reception. I used to think these things only happened in movies. The marriage was never legally finalized, so maybe it was not a real marriage ending. Story 29. On the wedding day, a tape was leaked showing the bride had a one-night stand with her ex. Guess who leaked it? The ex. Story 30. 2 hours. Traditional arranged marriage. They spent 3 years getting to know one another and were deeply in love. 2 hours after the wedding, they got divorced. No one knew what happened until a few years later. He was a eunuch and never told her. Story 31. I joined a friend as his guest for his sister's wedding. On the way to the reception afterward, she called everyone to say she was getting an annulment because she found something on his phone right after the wedding, but asked everyone to enjoy the party since it was paid for. I never found out exactly what was on the phone, but the food was excellent at the reception, and whatever it was, the marriage was annulled without much drama. Story 32. It was not technically a marriage, but I know a man who proposed to his girlfriend. She said yes, but then admitted to him that she had been unfaithful and hoped he would forgive her. It ended right there. Story 33. Less than 12 hours before the wedding, the groom slipped coming out of the shower and tried to call off the wedding due to an invisible injury. It was obviously a half-hearted excuse, and his friends and family were not convinced, so the couple went ahead and got married. Before midnight, there were drunken conversations about canceling the wedding. It is unclear exactly when the decision was made, but there were tears and tantrums, with the unhappy couple staying behind closed doors. Everyone left very quickly in the morning. Story 34. I had a friend who got married, and that night when they went to their apartment after the reception, her two brothers were there. They prevented my friend from coming in because only his name was on the lease. She had decided a month before the wedding not to actually get married to him but wanted the party and the gifts. He ended up sleeping in his car that night and had to call the police to get them to leave his apartment. She never signed the marriage certificate, so they never legally got married. Story 35. I have a friend who got married and, less than 8 months later, divorced her husband. He was lying to her and taking money from her grandmother without telling her. She said it felt like they were already just roommates and not partners. She kept the house and rented out the rooms to people. That's how she met her now husband and the father of her child. She seems much happier now. Story 36. My dad's first marriage lasted only a few hours. When they came home from the reception, she started a huge fight because his uncle, who had traveled 200 miles for the wedding, was staying at their 3-bedroom house. This uncle had raised and supported my dad from the age of 13, helping him with education, finding a job, and providing accommodation. My dad told her to go back to her parents and never spoke to her again. Story 37. I used to play in a band. We used to get all sorts of gigs, and then we had a wedding to play for. We were sitting slightly backstage when the wedding party all came and sat in front of us. There were the usual speeches: father of the bride, father of the groom, and so on. When the groom got up to make his speech, the whole atmosphere changed. The groom questioned his now legal wife about where she had been the previous night. She gave a complicated response. Then he asked his best man where he had been the previous night. The groom then struck his best man and walked out. Apparently, the groom wanted to have a chat with his best man regarding the wedding. When he arrived, his soon-to-be wife had her car parked in the driveway. He crept around and found his soon-to-be wife with his soon-to-be best man. It was the shortest marriage I have ever seen. Story 38. A family member was married to a man who had a kidney transplant. For about 2 years, he didn't work and almost died. My relative ended up working 2 jobs to keep their house and marriage going while going to the hospital every day to check on him. He received a donor kidney on his deathbed, recovered, and 3 months later told my relative that he met a 21-year-old single mother in the Philippines and wanted her blessing to have a new lease on life. This was after 15 years of marriage. The man was in his mid-60s. My relative was in her 50s at the time. It was that bad. Story 39. The wife was from one state while the husband was from another. The wife tried to get the husband to leave his job to be with her. She had no job and he would have to look for a new one there. They lasted 1 month. Being in the same cultural community, the wife and people from her village are known to do this when they cannot get their husbands to move to them. Story 40. I was a photographer at a wedding on Saturday morning. I hurried to process the film and produce proofs, only to find they broke up on Monday. Story 41. They got married at the church, and the whole congregation pulled together to set up food and decorations. It was a shotgun wedding. The next day, the new husband left, and another woman was posting pictures of them together on social media. The worst part was that the pastor made the bride apologize to the church the following week. Story 42. When my wife died from COVID-19, it took 4 days. One day she felt bad and went to the hospital. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital and making the decision whether or not to keep her on life support. It really was fast and really sucked. Married 22 years, gone in 4 days. Rest in peace, my beautiful, wonderful, loving wife Kimmerson, also known as Pony Eye. I miss that beautiful smile. Story 43. This is not the shortest marriage length. However, my ex, when we were still together, had a close friend, and they decided to get tattoos together. My ex got our kids' names, and her friend got her husband's name in a heart. They had been married for about 10 years. I joked, I guess you've got to keep him around now. The next week, they told us they were getting divorced, and she went to get the heart filled in. Story 44. Not in a literal sense, but certainly the fastest I have noticed that a marriage was going to end. I was at my cousin's wedding, and during the reception his bride said, I knew he was the one when he asked me to marry him 3 times. After the 3rd time, I just had to say yes. He was so persistent. That was sign number 1, and a sign that this should have never happened. A strange thing to say nonetheless. Then there was a literal tornado that hit the town in South Dakota, and we had to shelter in the building we were in for about 20 minutes as it passed. That was sign number 2. They lasted a couple of years, but everyone left that wedding feeling uneasy about the whole thing, especially after what she said and how she said it, and then, of course, a tornado. A bad omen. She had undiagnosed bipolar disorder and just went absolutely crazy on him. I am not blaming her for her mental health issues. It is just part of the story. They divorced 2 years later, and now he is happily remarried to another interesting woman. I guess he has a type. Story 45. I sang at a wedding ceremony one June and was asked by one of the guests to sing at their wedding 3 weeks later. I did and noticed the couple from the first wedding fighting the entire time. About a week later, I went out for the evening and the groom was there, hitting on me all night. I heard they split about 4 days after that. Story 46. There is a well-known television reporter on the West Coast who unfortunately lost her husband to a heart attack on their honeymoon. It is very tragic. Story 47. One of my friend's marriages didn't even last until the end of the reception. It was discovered that she cheated on him with her ex a week before the wedding. Came out in the most unfortunate way. Her maid of honor got very drunk and spilled the beans while the best man was making his speech. Luckily, it was annulled as far as I know. Story 48. The marriage lasted about 5 years, but I knew from the start it was doomed. I was the maid of honor, and the bride spent the entire day before the wedding reminiscing about her previous long-term boyfriend and asking me and her stepmother if she was making a mistake by marrying the rebound. Story 49. My coworker's new husband decided a few days after their wedding to visit his ex-wife and tell her he was remarried. This involved showing her the photos, telling her about the food, and having sex with her. He kept visiting his ex-wife until my coworker found out and he had to come clean. It was over within 2 weeks. Story 50. I still remember my former friend who met a girl, proposed, got married, and then got divorced all within the span of 9 months. 3 months of dating, 3 months of engagement, 3 months of marriage. It was wild. Story 51. We have a family member who recently filed for divorce 2 months after their wedding and after 2 years of living together. Story 52. My cousin had a big elaborate wedding that lasted only a month. This happened when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I remember feeling happy that she annulled the marriage because I had been set to be the flower girl, but she switched it to 2 of my cousins instead due to family politics. We were all the same age, but some family members liked shutting me out, and I was very upset. No amount of arcade games could make me feel better. This was also the beginning of some of my deeper interpersonal issues. I found out much later, at age 32, that during that month of marriage, she had called my uncle in complete distress, asking for help because her new husband had lost his temper, destroyed their home interior, and physically abused her, leaving her bleeding and covered in bruises. She was automatically granted a divorce. She also spent some time self-isolating afterward, even though no one knew she was being physically abused and in danger. When I learned this much later, it completely changed my view. She was absolutely right to call for help. She is doing fine now. She remarried about 7 years later, and they have been together since, with children. Story 53. One of my coworkers' daughters got married at 2 p.m. The reception was outdoors at a park. The couple was cutting the wedding cake when the party was raided by the police. The groom was arrested because they found a large amount of drugs in a plastic bag at the bottom of a bowl of potato salad. They took the groom away in handcuffs. The bride and her mother got him bailed out of jail late that night. The bride was determined to go through with the honeymoon. Once he was released, around 2 a.m., she was driving and he was in the passenger seat. They stopped at a red light. He bailed out of the car and ran away. She never saw him again. Her mother lost her bail money, and the bride had to get an annulment. Yes, I was there, watched all of it, and also notarized her annulment papers. Story 54. I DJ'd a wedding about 15 years ago. The groom's mother brought out all the liquor halfway through for a private party that only her family was invited to. The groom attended. The bride was discussing the relative benefits of divorce and annulment that evening. Story 55. I was invited to a wedding that was to start at 2 p.m. I received a phone call around 11 a.m. informing me that the groom had called off the wedding, and his parents offered to pay her parents for the cost. So I guess this one was a near miss. I think they are still together, actually, but unmarried. Story 56. My dad marries people. He married a couple. 2 or so hours later, they came to his house asking if he had mailed the marriage certificate. Normally, he goes directly to the post office, but this time he went home first. They tore up the certificate and left. My dad said it was a nice wedding. They definitely spent some money on it. According to my dad, they broke up as well. Story 57. It was not as short as some people are saying. I went to a friend's wedding, and months later when I saw him again, he said that she got a new job at a firehouse and almost immediately started dating a man who worked there. They dated for about 5 years, then got married. Months later, she cheated, got a divorce, and moved in with another firefighter. How can you be that firefighter and think that this woman is someone you can trust? Story 58. At the wedding reception, a few hours after the ceremony, there was a lot of previous bad blood between the in-laws, and a huge fight broke out during the ceremony. The law in my country dictates that a marriage can be dissolved a minimum of 6 months after taking place. Those must have been some awkward 6 months. Story 59. Just over an hour after they said, "I do." During the reception, the best man drunkenly confessed in his speech to having an affair with the bride since the couple's engagement 2 years earlier. The best man and the groom had been best friends since they were kids. And as the bride's brother, I was both angry and embarrassed. But it was entertaining to see the best man get smacked by my dad. Story 60. As soon as my mom and her second husband got married, it was over. I mean, it was over before they got married, but I have never seen something dissipate so quickly. Story 61. I went to a wedding of a college friend 2 weeks ago. Yesterday, I found out that the bride came home early one day and found her partner in bed with a coworker. Story 62. 3 months after they got married, my friend gave him an ultimatum. She was his priority now that she was his wife, not his mother. However, he preferred his mother and left my friend. She told me that his mother manipulated him by making up illnesses like cancer, depression, and other conditions to keep him by her side. Here's the kicker, he is a psychologist. He also acted as if he were his mother's spouse because their father left them, and he took on that role. They also sued my friend for unknown reasons. The man served her divorce papers on her 30th birthday with an aunt of his who is a lawyer. They had been together for 6 years before marrying. Story 63. A close call for same-day annulment and a Reddit legend. Story 64. On their honeymoon, within a week, the groom went bonkers and disappeared on purpose because he wanted out. The father of the bride spent $50,000 on the wedding. Oof. Story 65. I used to work as a waiter for a wedding catering company. At one particular wedding, the groom got up to give his speech. He started by saying, "I'd like to say how beautiful my new wife is and how much I'm looking forward to spending my life with her. But seeing as she's been having an affair with the best man for over a year, I don't think I will." At this point, all hell broke loose, with the groom's family verbally and physically attacking the best man. The bride was having a literal meltdown, and we, the staff, stood around in shocked silence. The groom looked smugly content amid the chaos. He had known she was cheating and knew he could annul the marriage, so he chose to call her out in front of everyone they knew. Story 66. A girl I went to high school with married her longtime partner, with whom she has 2 children. I do not talk to her anymore, but she shares a lot on social media, and it seemed like a turbulent relationship. She often posted things like, "A real man does not leave his family." Anyway, they separated for good just weeks after the wedding. I do not know why, but she was very upset about it all over social media. Story 67. 2 weeks ago, Mario Lopez married the woman who appeared in the Doritos commercial. She later discovered that he had an encounter with a stripper at his bachelor party. Story 68. My father's cousin, the father of the bride and my father's uncle, came to the wedding drunk with his even drunker older brother. They got into a fight with the other side, which escalated so badly that even the bride was beaten and the police were called. I wasn't there, but I heard from my grandma that they attacked like savages and even hurt people from the bride's side who were sitting at the tables. Story 69. She took every penny out of their 5-figure joint savings account because she wanted to go on a shopping trip, buying clothes, jewelry, and more. He did not want that to happen again. He was at the lawyer's office the next morning. The marriage ended in less than a season. Story 70. Had a friend years ago who told me she married her high school boyfriend on Saturday. He went to work on Monday and never came home. She waited and hoped for a month before tossing the unfiled marriage certificate in the trash. Story 71. My uncle's marriage lasted about as long as the open bar. It was the biggest disaster. Story 72. The evening of the wedding. Less than 6 hours after the ceremony, he had tried to call it off a couple of months before. He was then persuaded it was cold feet. He went absent without leave the night before, turned up, and tried to call it off the morning of. She went ballistic, and essentially he gave in to the pressure, which he shouldn't have. After the speeches, he left again and told her he couldn't. Story 73. 2 weeks. A family member married a man she had only been dating for a couple of months. He quit one of his jobs right after the wedding, and then she discovered he was completely illiterate. He could not read written language at all. Story 74. A couple of weeks ago, unfortunately the bride decided to switch birth control methods and did not allow enough time between stopping one and starting another. So she developed a blood clot that caused her death. Even worse, the widower took someone else on their already planned and paid for first anniversary cruise. In his defense, he was not in a good medical condition. Story 75. A friend of mine got married. 2 days after the wedding, her spouse disappeared. She did not say a word, just left and never returned. A couple of weeks later, she received a letter stating that her spouse wanted a divorce. That was it. I am not sure if they ever met again. Story 76. My wife was friends with someone who woke up the morning after and said she was done. The man pretended he was a virgin and wanted to wait for marriage, but had a micropenis and refused all sexual acts except penile-vaginal intercourse. Story 77. About 2 weeks. She started dating her future second husband a couple of months before the wedding. They met at Burning Man. Still a more romantic meeting than her first husband. They met when he was her music teacher in high school. Story 78. A friend of a friend got married and then went straight on honeymoon. On that honeymoon, they met a couple who were also on their honeymoon and with whom they really connected. Long story short, at the end of the honeymoon they had done a full couple swap, and to this day they are each now married to the partner in the other couple. A happy ending all around, I guess. Story 79. The photograph of one of my distant cousins, taken when he was getting ready to go to university, was married to the photograph of a girl he did not know in a ceremony that neither the bride nor groom were aware of. This took place in the motherland, arranged by parents who had randomly met in a temple, showed pictures, shared stories of their children, and immediately agreed to a family partnership, with a priest available to perform a quick ceremony. The children were told they were married. Both separately confessed that it was not going to work out because they had secret boyfriends or girlfriends. This caused quite a scandal due to dating and possibly having sex before marriage, and how growing up in the United Kingdom had destroyed family values. Both sets of parents accused each other of great shame. The priest was disgusted and threw them out, while other worshippers became somewhat violent due to the disrespect shown to their families, the temple, the priest, and to God. This news spread back to extended family across the world, with shame being the key word. Decades later, it is still talked about at large family gatherings with snide comments. If the two families somehow meet at the temple or large events in the United Kingdom, insults are still exchanged. My cousin has never lived it down, and from what I could gather, neither has the girl. People are irrational. Story 80. They proceeded with the wedding since they had already spent a lot on it, but did not stay at the same house afterward. The wife caught her soon-to-be husband cheating again. They separated within a year. Her proceeding with the wedding is still a question mark for me. Story 81. My relative married a respectable man known to her family since childhood. She excused herself to the washroom and eloped with her boyfriend, taking all the jewelry and expensive gifts she received at the reception. Story 82. It is hard to say. The soon-to-be wife found out her husband was cheating but still went through with the bachelorette party and wedding. The divorce happened soon after. That was awkward because everyone knew. Story 83. The lady never came home from the wedding venue. She went straight to her sister's house. The man later found out that she married him for immigration purposes. I represented the man to get the marriage annulled. Story 84. My former boss's brother got married. After the ceremony, no one saw the bride or groom for about an hour. Someone went to check on them. Both were drunk and screaming at each other. The bride claimed she wanted a divorce before even enjoying the reception. Story 85. I have been through my own divorce, having married an immature man who now only has his video games and arcade machines, but no wife. After reading these, I am never getting married again. This situation is crazy. Story 86. A couple got married. The husband smashed cake in the face of his wife despite her asking him not to, and she was wearing a custom silk gown costing over $30,000. She came from a wealthy family, and he was a struggling musician. She had security remove him and his friends and paid him $50,000 for an annulment almost immediately. The grounds he claimed are unknown, but diminished mental capacity is likely. A prenuptial agreement would have given him nothing. Story 87. This thread was one of the best reads on Reddit for me. Took me a long time to read to the bottom. Usually I would get bored and leave the thread, but definitely not this time. Story 88. On the same day she married the wrong man, was in my friend's bed that night, and they are still together after 17 years. Story 89. My cousin's son got married, and the parents of the groom stayed the night at my parents' home. The father of the groom left his dress pants there by accident. Since I live in the same city as them, I took the pants home, and they were supposed to pick them up. About 6 months later, they finally came to pick up the pants. I asked how the married couple was doing. They were already divorced. Story 90. I didn't really see it end. I heard about it secondhand because I knew some of the people involved. Forgive the fuzziness. This was 10 years ago. It started with a couple who are still together, Clint and Dina. I attended their wedding with my family because Clint was both a longtime family friend and my dad's coworker. At that wedding, I met Dina's sister, Maddie. She was very intense and found me fascinating. I tend to have that effect on certain kinds of people. A few years later, my parents were regulars at the local Texas Roadhouse for happy hour. It was where their whole friend group gathered, bartenders included. A regular they didn't know was a man named Matt. Matt met Maddie, and they hit it off so well they ran off to Las Vegas and got married. The bartender working the first time he came in after the wedding was one of our friends. She found out the news on Facebook, but he hadn't been in for a week or two after the post. So she congratulated him and asked how things were going. He gave her a look and said he was getting an annulment. Why? Well, Maddie tried to run him down with her car very much on purpose. The people who tend to find me fascinating are people who are unstable. He never had a chance. I have no idea what happened to her. But I got this whole story when my parents came in for happy hour, and their friend was absolutely bursting to tell them what went down because she knew Maddie's relation to my dad's coworker. Story 91. About 36 hours, a week after they met. He was engaged to another woman who broke it off, so he met and married my coworker as some sort of twisted payback. I guess you could say it worked because the original couple reconciled and got back together after the brief marriage, which was never consummated, was annulled. These were all wealthy families in wine country, not trailer trash as you might expect. Story 92. I saw Britney Spears arguing with Jason Alexander the night of their 2004 wedding at a club in Las Vegas. Their marriage was annulled 55 hours later. Story 93. My cousin's marriage lasted 11 months. They were together for 6 years. After they divorced, her husband started working in the same building on a different floor. He saw her name on a list, pointed it out to his coworkers, and said, "I used to date her." Story 94. My cousin got married in a huge, elaborate, expensive wedding and then spent her entire honeymoon with a man she met at the location, possibly in Italy, Europe. I am not sure if they are still married because I do not talk to that side of the family, but I heard about it. Her mother is completely fanatical and extreme in her beliefs. Her other daughter is not very bright. What a family. Story 95. 3 days. The bride ran away with her liver after 3 days of getting married. She was arrested by the police for stealing her husband's money and credit cards. She was once my roommate, unfortunately. She had a habit of double timing for a long time. Story 96. A friend of mine said his ex's name instead of fiancé during the wedding, but they still went through with the ceremony. She became paranoid afterward and controlling. They ultimately got a divorce after a few months. It was his second. Later, he got back together with his ex, and they had a child, but they never married, as far as I know. Story 97. A bride complained about the groom's cousin ruining the wedding as he was in a wheelchair and couldn't keep up with the other groomsmen. I went to him immediately and told him, "Don't do it." It lasted 3 weeks. Story 98. I was at a wedding where the groom told me 2 days before the ceremony that he did not love the bride. I never thought she loved him either. They somehow lasted 4 months together. Their separation was amicable. Story 99. I was a court reporter, and in 1971 we had a divorce case where a couple got married. They consummated the marriage, and the husband got up the next day, said he wanted a divorce, and left. She wanted it annulled, but the judge said no because they consummated the marriage. She wanted all the gifts. He wanted his friends' gifts so he could give them back. Story 100. A coworker's brother married a woman in Thailand on a Saturday. On Sunday, he was hit by a car and died. Story 101. Some person, to put it mildly, got married and the next day both he and his wife died. That said, this was in 1945, so I did not see it for myself. Story 102. I have attended weddings where I knew with absolute certainty that the couple would be divorced within a few years. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.